Well, friends, it seems the wilderness isn't done with us just yet. Last week, we read another passage from the prophet Isaiah about the Babylonian exile, when the Israelites were defeated and banished from their homes in Jerusalem. Displaced and distraught, they called out to God, "If only you would tear open the heavens and come down." This week, it's as if God has heard their cry. "Get ready," says the prophet. "Prepare a way in the wilderness, make a highway through the desert." And 500 years after Isaiah, in the 1st century CE, John the Baptist uses those same words to announce the coming of the Christ. In both cases, the messenger has a gospel to deliver. Gospel, euangelion in Greek, a word that means good news, glad tidings. The Holy One is coming. At least that's what they said. But now another 2,000 years have passed, give or take, and that voice is still echoing in the wilderness. Every year about this time, we hear those words, comfort, oh my people." We prepare the way, or at least we decorate it, accompanied by the strains of Handel's Messiah, or a Muppet Christmas, or the Pentatonics, depending. Every year we wait for that chorus of angels, all shiny and joyful, to deliver their glad tidings. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace among all people. And yet, wars still rage. Fists fly. Hateful words cut to the quick. Relationships among religions, across cultures, between women and men, remain too often strained to the breaking point. Despite generations of repeated glad tidings, it seems the wilderness isn't done with us yet. It might even occur to one to wonder, say while sipping one's tea and reading the morning paper, why we still listen to those prophetic, angelic voices at all. Whether their attempts at comfort are a bit quaint or out of date. Do they honestly mean to suggest that this year it really is going to happen? Every mountain finally leveled, every bumpy road made smooth, despite all the evidence to the contrary? With all due respect, Isaiah and John, these days I find more cause for despair than for hope in the news. More eruptions of violence than signs of peace in the world. The very land for which those Israelites yearned remains contested space all these generations later. Beloved but unsettled home to Jewish, Muslim, and Christian Palestinians and Israelis. Even now, the city of Jerusalem groans under the weight of competing convictions and deep-seated animosities, urgent longings, and intractable fears too easily triggered. Countless people pray fervently for peace in the Middle East every day, but the way remains shrouded from our view. It seems, my friends, that the wilderness is not done with us yet. Indeed, some days it feels like the Herods of the world have already won. All of those who are determined to trample anyone that stands in the way of accumulating wealth and power. making the way smooth for themselves while throwing up roadblocks for those most in need. I wonder, are we so far from the slaughter of the innocents? When Herod ordered the murder of all of the children ages 2 and under, rather than risk being overthrown by one boy prophesied to become a king? In our own country, all those 2,000 years later, we still make choices that favor wealth over welfare, profits over people, checkbooks over children. Still, we wait for those mountains to tumble. Still, I wonder whether those voices can be trusted. And then this week, I rediscovered another voice, the voice of Zechariah, father of John the Baptist and high priest in the temple. On the day his son, John the Baptist, was born, he prayed this prayer. By the tender mercy of our God, the dawn from on high will break upon us, to give light to those who sit in the darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the ways of peace. And for some reason, as I read those words, it dawned on me, it is precisely because the wilderness is not done with us that we need to repeat those glad tidings, to give light to those who sit in the shadow of death. It's the proclamation that sets us on the path and guides our feet toward that promised peace. Any 4-year-old will tell you you can't build a road unless you know where you're headed. We need to map out the way before we can walk it. We need to paint the picture so that we can live it. We need to rehearse the promises over and over, give them flesh and breath until they become real. Isaiah knew this better than most. What will God's arrival look like, feel like, sound like? It will look like a vast desert transformed by spring flowers and rocky roads made smooth for walking. It will smell like fresh air and feel like running down the road with wild abandon and without pain. It will sound like a chorus of joyful voices singing at the top of their lungs, exuberant and, I think, slightly off-key. That's what Isaiah said, more or less. That's what John the Baptist proclaimed. And that's the picture they painted to lend courage and comfort to their people. They didn't just describe the wilderness. They cast a vision of the alternative, a landscape erupting with vivid new life. And suddenly I realize I've been coming at this all wrong. Suddenly I find myself asking, can we do that? What the prophets did? What the angels did? Can we imagine another way? This fall, in this country, there's been a movement. The hashtag #MeToo movement, which has stirred up lots of conversation about the nature and frequency of sexual misconduct and abuse. So much so that Time magazine just declared the entire movement Person of the Year. This is a remarkable thing, a hopeful thing, that women, and sometimes men, are finding their voices, speaking their truth. And in response, there's been a whole lot of discussion and no shortage of hand-wringing about what's to be done next. Who should be believed? Who should be fired? Who should step down? It is, my friends, a necessary discussion. part of finding our collective way out of this particular wilderness. But there is a bigger and more critical, more interesting conversation, one that can help us to paint a new picture, to find that new way. It's a conversation that begins by asking, what would the workplace look like, feel like, sound like, if power was shared? If women and men were regarded with equity and respect? If raising a family was viewed as a joint responsibility of fathers and mothers? If work life was structured to honor, even celebrate those family commitments? Imagine a workplace in which diverse leadership styles are valued and women's voices routinely sought out. What, for that matter, does healthy intimacy look like, feel like? Imagine two people standing on level footing, never leveraging power one against the other, never raising a fist or using words to hurt. Imagine being honored and cherished just as you are, respecting one another enough to wait until you hear a loud and enthusiastic yes. And what about peace? What does that look like, feel like, sound like? Imagine our military and police being given more training in the art of diffusing tension and resolving conflict without violence. Imagine schools teaching our children not just how to speak persuasively, but also how to listen effectively and deeply. Imagine if curiosity were a trait we looked for in our elected officials, and differences in our ways of approaching the world were valued or even embraced. Imagining the possibilities, my friends. It might not get us the whole way, but it doesn't have to. God is headed down the road towards us. We just need to clear the path. This season, this is the mental shift that I am trying to make. With the help of John the Baptist, and Isaiah and Zechariah, with the help of Mother Mary and Elizabeth and all those angels and the Magi, in fact, with nearly everyone we hear from in Advent, all the players in this vast drama who have chosen to speak with confidence about things that are yet unfolding, even while they are still around the corner, just out of view. Maybe it sounds like pie in the sky, but for my part, I'll throw in my lot with those who choose to envision the future in fine and technicolor detail. The ones who know how to cast a vision that captures my imagination and engages all my senses. Because friends, here's the thing. Anyone who has lived near a road that's under construction, as I have over this past 2 months, will tell you that making the way smooth is rarely easy. Generally speaking, it requires jackhammers and heavy lifting and stirring up a whole lot of dust. The same thing goes for building peace. Not peace which is just the avoidance of conflict, but peace which is the presence of love and justice, shalom. That, my friends, that requires all the imagination we can muster, all the sweat, all the muscle, all the determination. And so we ought to start today, to describe the way and then to build it. Try this. Choose any story in the news. or any struggle in your own life and ask, what would it look like, feel like, sound like if this conflict were resolved, these broken places healed, this bumpy way made smooth? Be as concrete as you can. Paint the picture in your mind. Maybe even find a friend and do some imagining together over gingerbread lattes. And then pick one thing that you can do this month that might just get you and us one more step down that road. Friends, maybe the wilderness isn't done with us yet, but neither is God done with the wilderness. She's got big plans for a major overhaul. Isaiah said so. So did John and Zechariah and so many others. I'm the one who needs to be reminded every Advent. I need to hear the vision spoken boldly, vividly, again and again. Yes, there is good news. Glad tidings for all people. The Holy One is coming. So join me as together we make a way. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Sing hallelujah to our